Good morning and happy Mother's Day. What a celebration today, and I'm glad to be able to share this with you. I want to thank Charles King for playing for us. Charlie has been playing for us now for a number of weeks and has been a long-term member of this church and has played here for many, many years. And so we thank him for that, for sharing his talents with us. We have a couple of announcements to give to you before we get into the body of our worship service, but don't let this get by without me telling you how glad I am that you're here and how I celebrate with you on this great, great day, Mother's Day. Couple of things. One is that we are asking for prayer requests. If you have a prayer request, you know someone who needs some extra prayer, please let us know. Call the church office and we will bring that to all the leaders of the church and allow them to lift up that concern in prayer. As well as a couple of other things, the directories have been out for a week and distributed to a number of people. I had no idea that as soon as we set them out, there'd be a line of people waiting to get that directory, but it's really it's beautiful, and we get to see what our congregation looks like and get all the up-to-date information. So, and I haven't heard anyone say that any of the information is incorrect, so we may just have it perfectly right now, I hope. The other thing is that the session met to decide when we will open for regular worship in the sanctuary. And it was a good meeting, and there was a lot of debate about different things to do. I will tell you, first of all, that the date will be at the end of May, so we have a number of weeks to prepare for this. And the reason we need to do that is because I have right here in my hand a list of things that we need to put in place. Some restrictions on seating, some recommendations on things like masks and how to get into the church and leave the church at the end of the service, and a whole bunch of different things, all of which we will put together and have available for the membership before we do that. One of the announcements that I'm really excited to make is that we're going to put in a closed circuit television system so that people can worship in the fellowship hall and in the sanctuary if we don't have enough seating with the seating limitations. All of this is contingent upon the recommendations from medical and government authorities. Primarily, we will be watching the CDC for their recommendations on when it makes sense to do this. But right now, our target is at the end of the month, and we'll be more specific as time goes by. Just think about it. It will be a wonderful, wonderful time to be in this beautiful sanctuary together. And speaking of being together, I'd like to welcome today, in addition to the online worship, we have Alan and Raylan Dobson here today who are going to sing for us. Charlie has already played, and he'll play some more at the end of the service. But Raylan and Alan are going to sing for us now a beautiful song that was actually scheduled to be a part of our worship service way back in March when all of this happened and we had to cancel regular worship services. So I know that you will enjoy it as much as they enjoy sharing their talents with you. The song they're going to sing is "Lord, I Need You."
is Christ in me. Where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. So teach my song to rise to you. When temptation comes my way, and when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. And when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you.
Our scripture passage for today's message comes from the book of 1 Peter, the 2nd chapter, beginning with the 4th verse. As you come to him, the living stone, rejected by men but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. For in Scripture it says, "See, I lay a stone in Zion, a chosen and precious cornerstone, and the one who trusts in him will never be put to shame." Now to you who believes, this stone is precious, but to those who do not believe, the stone the builders rejected has become the capstone, and a stone that causes men to stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. They stumble because they disobey the message, which is also what they were destined for. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, I'll say it again. Happy Mother's Day. Nobody deserves a special day all to themselves any more than today's moms. A cartoon showed a psychologist talking to his patient, and he said, well, let me see. You spend 50% of your energy on your job, 50% of your energy on your husband and 50% of your energy on your children, I think I know there's a problem. I like the story about two 4-year-olds who were presented their mom on Mother's Day with a potted plant. It was beautiful, and she was thrilled, but there was a backstory to it. Because the oldest one said, well, there was a beautiful bouquet at the flower shop that we wanted to get for you, but it was very expensive, so we didn't get it. But it had a really pretty ribbon on it, and written on it was, "Rest in peace." And we wanted to give that to you because you're always asking us for just a little bit of peace. Well, that's funny, you know. I hope, if nothing else, Mom will get a little bit of peace today. Our lesson for the day comes from the epistle of 1 Peter. And I want to draw your attention to that last verse. This verse tells us who we are. Once you were no people, says the author, but now you are God's people. That's who we are. It's just simply put that way, and yet it is the great reality. We are God's people. But what does it mean to be God's people? You can look across New Smyrna Beach today. You look across our country, and you will see countless churches of all different kinds. There are Catholic, Protestant churches, every denomination, all of that, and every one of them claiming to be a part of God's family. No one can argue, but this is the truth, because we are all in this world together, all authentic examples of the way that God can shape and mold us to make us a special people for God. Different people have different needs and different ideas, and so that's why there's so many denominations and churches where people can finally feel a part of God's family. In rural parts of our country, and I remember when I first moved up to Chattanooga, Tennessee, the question that I was asked first wasn't, where did you go to school, or where did you live, or what, any of those. The first question was essentially, who are your people? Where do your people come from? And the man who asked me specifically, I knew that he had like an encyclopedia for a brain of these things. And I said, well, my name is George Head, and we come from Kentucky. And he had several different places. And I said, well, we're the Owensboro Kentuckys. And he said, oh, Owensboro Heads. Oh, okay. And he connected all that together because in order to have an identity, he wanted to make sure where we fit in all of the families of the world. It was an amazing thing. People want to believe believe that they belong to a family. But today, we don't have those kinds of roots so much anymore. They're not as important. On an average year, some 40 million American people move. They move out of their houses, they move to someplace else. To put it another way, every 10 years, between 40 and 60% of the average Americans in average American towns completely change their population. We've lost much of the connectedness of our past. In a sense, we have to carry our sense of identity with us. We're closer to the nomadic existence of Abraham than we are to the rural America of the early 20th century. Abraham's people always knew who they were, in spite of the fact that their existence was nomadic. They were wanderers. Now, Abraham was their father, but because they felt a real connection with him, with God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that gave them their identity. And it still does. Wherever the children of Abraham may roam, they are still in the family of God. And we claim that same heritage. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is our God, not by birth, but by adoption. That's who we are. We are God's people, his family, his children. And on this Mother's Day of 2020, it would be good for us to refresh our understanding of what it means to be a family, a human family, and God's family. First of all, we need to acknowledge the fact that it's not easy to live in a family. Life teaches you things like loyalty and patience and understanding and perseverance. And, well, there's a lot of things that you wouldn't need if you were just to stay single. There's so much out there. A young girl was talking with her mom. Why am I not in this picture? She demanded. Well, you weren't born yet, Mom said. Well, what does that mean? I wasn't born yet. Well, predictably, Mom was a little bit for loss of words, but gave what she hoped would be a sufficient explanation for her little 4-year-old daughter. It wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough information for her, though. Well, then why wasn't I in the picture, she asked again. Well, because, her mom said with a little less of a smile, you weren't born yet. Well, if I wasn't born yet, where was I? And before the mother could think of an answer to that one, she asked again, why aren't I in this picture? I see Mommy, and I see Daddy, and I see my brother, and I see my sister, but I don't see me. Why? And don't tell me because I wasn't born yet. Mom, barely holding herself together from shouting at her, said, but there's the answer. That's the only answer. You had not been born yet. Well, if I wasn't born yet, then where was I? Mom said, well, you were in heaven. The little girl pondered that for a minute. She calmly took the picture album away. She put it down on the table. And on the way back to her room, she stopped and she glared at her mom. And she says, well, I'm sure not in heaven now. Sometimes family life gives us a glimpse of what heaven must be like. There are those good times, those warm times in which we ask what we would ever done to deserve such joy. But, in every family there are other times, like that little girl, when we know we're not in heaven yet. I'm really worried, said one little boy to a friend. Dad slaves away at his job, so I'll never have to want for anything. So I'll be able to go to college if I want to. Mom works hard every day, washing and ironing, cleaning up after me, taking care of me when I get sick. They spend every day of their lives working on my behalf, and I am worried. His friend said, well, what are you worried about? And he said, I'm afraid they might try to escape. It's difficult to live in a family. And the type of family you live in can make you or it can break you. Let me give you an example. A man named Max Jukes lived in New York. He didn't believe in churches. He didn't believe in Jesus Christ. He refused to allow his children to attend church, even if they wanted to. He had, in his lifetime, 1,026 descendants have come down from him. 300 of them were sent to prison for an average stay of 13 years. 190 of them were prostitutes. 680 were alcoholics. His family has cost the state so far $420,000, and they have contributed nothing to society. All right, it's a bad example. But Jonathan Edwards, who lived about the same time and in the same state, he loved the Lord. He saw that his children were in church every Sunday, even if they didn't want to be. They were on that day, and he had 928 descendants. And of these, 430 of them became ministers. 86 became university professors. 13 became university presidents. 75 of them authored books. 7 were elected to the United States Congress. 1 was vice president of his nation. His family never cost the state a dime. The difference in the two families was a reflection of one person, and that reflection shaped the destiny of each of those families. It's not easy to live in a healthy family, but it is critical. It is difficult, let's admit it, to be a parent. Parenthood is life's most challenging and complicated task. In his book called America on 6 Rubles a Day, the comedian Yakov Smirnoff commented, coming from the Soviet Union, he said, I was not prepared for the incredible variety of products available in the American grocery store. While on my first shopping trip, I saw powdered milk. You just add water and you get milk. And then I saw powdered orange juice. You add water and you get orange juice. And then I saw baby powder. And I thought to myself, what a country. Don't you wish that it was that easy? It is not easy to bear children, and it's not easy to raise them. When actor Robert Young was starring in the television series way, way, way back, Father Knows Best, many remember that, his teenage daughter asked him, Dad, how come each week on television you solve the most difficult family problems imaginable, and yet at home you seem so clueless? And he laughed and he said, well, honey, At the studio, I just have a good scriptwriter. That's what we need, isn't it? That's what we're looking for in living together today as a family, a good script writer. A good parent is something like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. A good parent is like a turtle because they are hard on the outside, but they're soft on the inside. I listened to an interesting radio program this week where working mothers were brought together to discuss what is going on in contemporary American society for working moms. And some things have changed, but some things have not changed. There are many, many, many couples who, when they have children in particular, have to both work in order just to make the basics of their financial needs. But if you know what's going on, you know that it is very difficult. But each of the women shared one common experience. And that experience was guilt. Guilt. Everywhere you turn, people are telling working moms, families in general, you're just not doing enough. You're a bad parent if you can't give your children this thing, or they don't attend the right school, or they don't wear the right clothes. At one time, American families were honored for their hard work and diligence, and I want to say to you right now that the kindest thing that you can say to a parent is you are doing a good job. And I commend you to keep it up. It's kind of sad, but the very people who have raised their own children and who can tell a new parent, don't worry about what he eats or doesn't eat, they're the ones who unfortunately keep silent when advice is desperately needed. So parents turn to experts who never raise kids themselves, who seem to know all about how it's done. When Michael was little, he devised his own diet. And it covered all 4 food groups. Let me see. He ate Cheerios, pretzels, peanut butter, and milk. That was it. And it drove us crazy. And I could see the look of guilt on his mom's face and the frustration in her eyes when that's all that he would eat. But she felt so much better when my mom told her that I spent the first few months of kindergarten eating nothing but soft-boiled eggs and raspberry Jell-O. I mean, have you ever noticed when parents get together, all they seem to talk about is their kids? You would think that they would have had enough of those little rugrats, but the dinner conversation always seems to turn towards kids. But you know why they do that? Because parents are comparing notes. They want to know how they are doing. Are other parents experiencing what they're experiencing? Is it normal for their children to want to eat grass? Is it perpetual runny nose? Is that a sign of some stinky personality? And that is where each of you can help. If your children are out on their own, you are a walking encyclopedia of useful information for young mothers and fathers. And they need to hear you and your advice, and most of all, your encouragement. It's not easy being a parent, and it's obviously not easy being a child either. Our children are facing difficult problems and choices much earlier than previous generations. The top 3 disciplinary problems in schools 40 years ago were simply listed as talking, chewing gum, and running in the halls. Now we're told that rape, robbery, and assault head the list. The 5 greatest fears of primary school children 20 years ago were animals and dark rooms and strangers and high places and loud voices. Today, it's parental divorce, nuclear war, lung cancer, pollution, muggings, and of course, pandemic. It's not easy living in a family today, and yet, in a culture such as ours, the family is more important than it has ever been. Why? Well, several reasons. Because first, it is from the family that we take our basic values. The Bible said it best thousands of years ago, quote, "Bring up a child in the way he should go, and he will not depart from it." More often than not, that is so true, and it is not simply because we are good teachers. They say, like father, like son, the way you live your life is the best example your son and daughter, your grandchildren will ever have for what it means to be a grown-up. It's been a while. I haven't received a newspaper to see if it's even still being published. But Kathy, the cartoon, it was great because over and over again, they would put the 2 characters together, Kathy and her mom, and some of the dynamics with it. One time, Kathy said, "Mom, I love you, but I'll never be like you." I'll never think like you. I'll never act like you. I'll never look like you. And Mom says, oh, I know. I used to say the same thing to my mom, and I wound up thinking just like her, acting just like her, looking just like her. See, you're just like me already. And at this, Kathy runs out of the room screaming, and Mom says, oh, isn't that cute? That's just what I used to do too. Now, my older brother, he has 3 boys of his own, and once we were talking about when we were kids, and we swore that no matter what happened when we grew up, we were not going to be like our dad. You know, he was so mean to us. I mean, he wouldn't let us stay out all night with our friends. He insisted that we do well at school. He kept an eye on the people that we knew, that we spent time with and all of that. I mean, we never wanted to grow up like him, but then you know what happened? One day, Ted, that's my brother, was walking by a mirror, and he glanced into it, and he stopped, and he said, Dad? That's scary, isn't it? I mean, but like it or not, our actions as parents do speak so much louder than our words. We are modeling our children's future behavior. If there is some part of your life that you regret, some part that embarrasses us, some part that is destructive, and we are a parent, the time to act is now. Every day we are teaching our children what is appropriate behavior. And it is from the family that we get these basic values. In addition, it's the family that gives us our basic support when we go out into the world. Most young people think their parents are too restrictive, too old-fashioned. Yeah, they're all out of touch. But what they don't know is how hard it is for a loving parent to let go. I was recently reading about a woman, she's housebound, 2 small kids, who was urged by her husband to join him at a company dinner party. And she spent time at the library. She wanted to catch up on what was going on in the world so she wouldn't seem to be clueless about all that. She picked out a nice dress, and at the dinner she was ready. She found herself sitting next to this distinguished guest she just charmed him with her delightful repartee, and she was doing so great. But then suddenly she looked up and she noticed that every other guest in the room was staring at her. And why, she wondered? And then she realized that she had cut up all the meat on her guest's plate into tiny pieces. Old habits, right? And then they die hard. And when you've been watching out for somebody for so long, it's hard to let go. Most parents know that it is their job, though, that someday their job will be done, and it will be hard to let go. Still, the caring parent is there giving encouragement, though, giving support, sometimes giving a helping hand. That's what we are there for. I mean, we never really ever just let them go. We project ourselves with them as they go out into the world, and it makes a difference. There was a drill sergeant who was frustrated at the efforts to make a soldier out of this recruit. The trainee just lagged behind on everything. He was the last one in after a march. He used any excuse that he could to go on sick call. He grumbled constantly about the food. He never made up his cot properly. He just wasn't cutting it. So one day, a noticeable change took over in the young man's life. His attitude was completely different. And when he was asked what he attributed this young soldier's change in attitude, the drill sergeant said simply, "Threats and punishments don't work. So I had to resort to the ultimate weapon. I called his mom." Well, I'll tell you, last night a friend asked me about what are you going to preach about on Sunday? It's Mother's Day, right? I said, yes, I am. And I told him some good advice I got years ago from a woman in the church. She asked me the same question the week before Mother's Day, "George, what are you going to be preaching about this week?" And I said, "Well, I'm not exactly sure yet." And she said, "Well, let me give you a suggestion. I'm bringing my mother to church on Mother's Day, and you can talk about whatever you want, but it had better include mothers, and it better be good." Okay. Mother's Day, it's a difficult day for some. It's difficult for some who have lost their mothers, especially if it's been relatively recently. It's difficult for mothers who've lost children. It's difficult for moms who, for one reason or another, did not have children of their own. For all these reasons, plus the nagging suspicion that all the hoopla is nothing more than a conspiracy between the Hallmark cards and the world's jewelers, candy makers, and florists to make a quick buck, preachers sometimes avoid any Mother's Day reference at all. But I believe that mothers are surely worth days of celebration. Think of the effect that godly mothers have had on some of the greatest people in history. John Quincy Adams said, "All that I am, my mother made me." Abraham Lincoln declared, "All that I am or ever hope to be, I owe to my mother." Julia Ward Howe, when she was 91 years of age, said, "We talked to 40 horsepower. If we had 40 mother power, it would be the most wonderful force in the world." So let me close with this. They say that man is mighty. He governs land and sea. He wields a mighty scepter on lower powers than he. But mightier power and stronger man from his throne has hurled. For the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. Happy Mother's Day. Let us pray. Today, O God, as we celebrate Mother's Day, we lift up the Christian home and we are filled with a variety of feelings, emotions, and memories. We give you thanks for the tender times when our mothers and fathers have mirrored your love for us. We remember them driving us to ball games and scouts and encouraging us with our homework, putting bandages on skinned knees, hugging our hurt pride, waiting up for us to come home at night. We remember these ordinary, everyday expressions of love, and our hearts are warmed. But it is also time for difficult memories, of families torn apart, of family members losing their way, of couples unable to have children, of loneliness in the midst of many, and we remember with sadness those parents who are no longer with us. Perhaps there was so much more that we would have wanted to say. And we ask, loving God, that you would ease our hurtful family memories and restore us a sense of your love. For we are your children, your chosen one. No matter what our family situations, we give thanks for our special place in your family. Continue to hold us in your tender embrace. For the times we have failed to cherish and use the gifts you have given to each of us, we ask your forgiveness. For the times we have failed to encourage the gifts and growth of others close to us, we ask your forgiveness. Guide us that we might live as your children, full of the awe and the wonder of all that life offers. And so, we lift our prayers first of all for all mothers and fathers, grandmothers, grandfathers, sisters, and brothers. Especially celebrate with new parents who are just beginning a journey of love. We lift up prayers for those we know who are hurting, who suffer with illness, who struggle with hard decisions, who grieve losses and past memories, who are confused about what to do next with their lives. We lift prayers for families who face loss. We lift prayers for the leaders of our country that they might support those things that strengthen and uphold families. But mostly, we ask your help, O God, and committing ourselves to living out the sort of unconditional love within our families that makes real the meaning of your steadfast and abiding love for us. So hear us now as we join our voices together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Well, happy Mother's Day. And now receive the benediction. Know that God goes with you from this place. And may God go with you and follow after you and lead you along the way until at last we are all safely in his home. Amen.